Good evening there, everybody. What is happening? Hopefully, y'all are having a wonderful day today. So, when it comes down to it, I thought, of course, that I would talk about this little video and this little topic that did end up piquing my interest. And for those of you that have not been paying attention to that of the boxing world or the boxing scene as of late, Mr. David Benavidez, his career has taken, in my view, quite a step up. Of course, in his career, he still does have to prove a little bit which he will have the potential to do, in my opinion, within these next couple of years, these next few years, depending on how far or not far he'll end up going. We'll see, how truly great he's going to be in some of these other fights. And of course, the biggest test of his career so far against Caleb Plant, he was victorious on that big pay-per-view fight. Not really quite sure how many views that it did or how many buys that it did, but it was a very interesting fight. It was greatly promoted, in my opinion. It was a great fight, just like I predicted that it was going to be. It was a clashing of the styles, and it was important for that reason, but it also was important to see how truly good or how great David Benavidez actually was, or how much of a challenger that he truly was going to be to, let's be real, Mr. Canelo Alvarez, because that basically was a litmus test to see how real was he. And of course, he's real enough to get past that of Caleb Plant, who I do consider an A-grade level fighter, just an A-minus level fighter. Well, in my opinion, David Benavidez, at least after that victory, has stood himself out from the rest of the contenders at the 168-pound weight division and 160-pound weight division. Just in my view, he pretty much has stood out from the rest of those contenders. And the big question is that will David Benavidez finally get that big fight against Canelo Alvarez sometime? Because of course, that's what that main fight was about. Whoever was going to win that fight was more than likely going to get their dream matchup against Canelo Alvarez. Caleb Plant, of course, the rematch. And as for David Benavidez, his first opportunity. Now, do I believe that that fight is going to happen this year? Canelo Alvarez versus David Benavidez? No, personally, I don't, because I think the first fight that Canelo is going to take, which I predicted, was the John Ryder fight. Just to, get rid of that mandatory status, and kind of get back in the flow of things. And that rematch against Demetrius, in my opinion, as Canelo has already stated, that's the main thing that's going to be on the table. That's what I've been predicting ever since last year. Certain people, of course, have tried to say that, oh, Canelo, he's ducking Demetrius and that, he's not going to be willing to get in the ring with him. Well, we'll see who is right about that, because, like I said, I've been predicting that Canelo Alvarez was going to get in the ring with Demetrius pretty much ever since last year. So we'll see what ends up happening with that. And that is going to be a very particularly interesting fight. Both the John Ryder fight and the Demetrius fight. The John Ryder fight to see at what point in time Canelo Alvarez really is at this point in time in his career. And the Demetrius fight to see that if he can possibly reclaim his number one pound for pound status. But we'll see what happens, at least in my view. But anyways, there was other people that would mention something in my comment section, something that I actually had not heard about, or that I only heard, a little bit through the grapevine. And they said, well, there's this news at David Benavidez that he might potentially sign a contract to fight David Morrell, Jermall Charlo, and Demetrius Andrade. What do you personally think about this? Because David Benavidez, of course, he's been calling out Canelo allegedly for a very long time. And if he ends up signing this contract, will this prove to you that David Benavidez was never serious about fighting Canelo Alvarez in the first place? Listen, what I'll say is this. I'm not really going to say that unless he were to actually sign a deal to fight all three of those guys. I'm not really 100% going to say that. But I don't think that one of these fights, in my view, would hurt. Once again, I don't think the Canelo Alvarez fight is going to happen this year anyway. And who knows, David Benavidez might be able to get off one or two fights, certainly one fight, before he gets that potential Canelo Alvarez fight. And what I'll also say is this. If Canelo Alvarez does end up winning that Demetrius rematch, don't be surprised at all if you see Canelo Alvarez vacate all the belts at 165, 168, and then he tries to unify 175, which I wouldn't really have a huge problem with. I would like to see the David Benavidez fight, but we'll see. But of course, Canelo, he actually did say that after the fight that he would return to 168. But we'll see. Because if he ends up dominating Demetrius I don't personally believe that if he does win that he would dominate I'm not really even quite sure if he's going to win that fight, but we'll see. We'll see what ends up happening there. It's going to be very interesting. But anyways, Dante's Boxing Nation made a video about it. Let's tune in because there is the potential to possibly fight David Morrell, Demetrius Andrade, and Jermall Charlo. I'm going to be talking about it, so is Dante. Let's get straight into it.
Yeah, Canelo's cool and all, but at the end of the day, nothing guarantees the Canelo fight. But sitting here fighting all the other opponents here at Showtime. That's Caleb Plant, that's David Benavidez, that's Charlo, of course, as well. Those are the fights that we're looking for. But yeah, like I said, Canelo's cool, but those are the big fights that could be made here.
Well, good on you, Demetrius Boo Andrade, for finally realizing that you're going to have to take other fights in the Canelo Alvarez fight. And I do agree that Canelo Alvarez has not seemed super excited in facing Demetrius Boo Andrade in the past. That is the one fight that I think Canelo Alvarez, that he believes that there's a little bit too much risk for the lack of reward, in my view. But what Demetrius Andrade is going to have to do, because he's just a guy that does not have a great fan base, he's a guy that doesn't have the most fan-friendliest of styles. He's not as marketable to some people as what Jermall Charlo has been, or even David Benavidez. So it's going to be harder for him to get up top, in my opinion. It's going to be harder. So what he's really going to have to do is that he's going to have to try to get the fights with David Benavidez or David Morrell or Caleb Plant or Jermall Charlo. You're going to have to try, to get in the ring with all those guys. Do I think that he'll get in the ring with all those guys? We'll see. I think that he wants to get in the ring with Jermall Charlo. Dante always said a lot of the times that a lot of people want to get in the ring with Canelo Alvarez because they know he's the highest payday, but also the weakest fighter there. No, that's not really the reason why people want to get in the ring with Canelo. People want to get in the ring with Canelo, and there are certain examples like that. Like when you talk about maybe Ryan Garcia, at least compared to Lomachenko, Gervonta Tank Davis, and some of those other fighters, at least, from what I see for now. But we'll see. But Canelo's not one of those guys. The reason why people want to get in the ring with Canelo is because not only do they realize that it'd be a humongous payday, but they also realize that it would really update their pound for pound status. That's just the way that I look at it. Jermall Charlo, in my opinion, is a fight that everyone takes a look at and says that's a decent payday and he has the most amount of flaws. That's that type of fight, because I don't think that certain people really take a look at Jermall Charlo and really fear him. And I'm talking about certain fighters like David Benavidez, Demetrius Andrade, David Morrell, Caleb Plant, Canelo Alvarez. I'm not really sure if any of those fighters fear him, because really, to be quite honest with you, at least at their best, I don't know if Jermall Charlo would beat any of those guys. Just is what it is. Anyway.
Dontaes Boxing Nation, what's going on, guys? So now that Canelo is on his way out, he's pretty much on the decline right now. David Benavidez, he is now the man to beat at 168. There was a time...
Well, a lot of people are saying that Canelo Alvarez is on the decline. We'll see what ends up happening with that. Like I said, we'll see what ends up happening with that. And it's very possible that he's on the decline. Who knows? I'm not really going to go as far to say that, because I think that he made a very big mistake gaining as much weight as what he did in the Demetrius Bivol fight. And I think that Demetrius Bivol is just a bit too large, really, for Canelo to handle him as well as some of those other fighters. Because Demetrius Bivol, for those of you that don't know him, Demetrius Bivol is an A+ level boxer. Like, he has excellent boxing IQ, excellent power, excellent speed, really excellent everything. It just is what it is. So we'll see. Like I said, we're really going to see if Canelo Alvarez has aged, quote unquote aged, or, if he really is not the same fighter as what he was within the past few years that I've seen him in the John Ryder fight, maybe in the Bivol rematch, but most importantly, probably in the David Benavidez fights or the Jermall Charlo fight, one of those fights. So we'll see how much longer Canelo Alvarez is going to last. Because I do believe he is about 33 years old. So who knows? He could be aging a little bit, worse for wear.
These fighters, they had to get a Canelo Alvarez fight to really propel their career. That's no longer the case. They no longer need Canelo anymore because Canelo is becoming more and more irrelevant every day. And if he...
Well, that's something that you want. No, these fighters, I'm not going to say that they necessarily need Canelo Alvarez, but they still need Canelo Alvarez more than what Canelo Alvarez needs them. Canelo Alvarez right now is still the main face of boxing when you talk about the most amount of views. But at the end of the day, it could be dwindling. So we'll see what ends up happening with that. Canelo, once again, these next 2 years, they're going to be very revelatory, because it could either, be the end of his career or a little bit of a new beginning, or for him to get back on track. We'll see.
It's up fighting against Bivol, which Eddie Hearn is saying that's the only option for him after Ryder. He loses that fight, and we don't know if Canelo even retires from that point on.
Well, we'll see whether Canelo Alvarez wins or loses that fight. I also agree, in my view, more than likely Canelo Alvarez will lose the fight. But don't count out Canelo Alvarez because Canelo, let me tell you this, Canelo is an all-time great fighter, no doubt about it. And if there is any fighter from 160 to 168, at least those, any fighters that came from there that could actually beat Demetrius Bivol, it would be Canelo Alvarez.
Is the reason.
And in my view, Canelo was winning the first 4 rounds in that fight. He was making Bivol very uncomfortable. But as soon as that stamina wore out, he was completely done. His stamina was awful in that first fight.
Why even Demetrius Andrade, he's not showing too much interest in trying to chase a Canelo Alvarez fight anymore. David Benavidez.
Well, no, with Demetrius Andrade has finally realized what he should have realized 17 years ago. And of course, I'm over-exaggerating with that. What Demetrius Andrade is realizing is that in order to get in the ring with Canelo Alvarez or to get some of these bigger fights, you don't just have to get in the ring with Canelo Alvarez, because a lot of these fighters, they love to say, oh, well, let me just hold out for this one fighter and I'm not fighting anybody else. I just want this one fighter. That's not how it works a lot of the time. Errol Spence Jr., had he taken that strategy, he would have never gotten the big fights against Sean Porter and Danny Garcia and some of those other guys. He would have never got those fights. He had to get in the ring with whoever he could get in the ring with. Same with Devin Haney. Same with, some of those other fighters, that had to do the same thing. You cannot just focus your, complete focal points on just one fighter and just hope to, get in the ring with that. That's not how it works. And Jermall Charlo's been hiding behind that excuse for a very long time as well.
Is not showing a whole lot of interest.
So once again, I'll give Demetrius Andrade this. At least he has shown that he finally realizes what he has to do, which is get Jermall Charlo or David Benavidez or Caleb Plant or David Morrell in the ring. Start getting those guys in the ring. And Demetrius Andrade, he don't have much time left. What is he, 36 years old? Somewhere around there? He don't have much time left at all. And he's never even fought one champion in his career. He's never even fought one former champion in his career. So I need to see what he's really able to do.
Either, but they are showing more interest in fighting each other. David Benavidez.
That's great, which is something that should have happened from the beginning.
As his father and trainer, he came out and revealed that they already have a signed contract to fight Boo Boo Andrade, Charlo, and David Morrell.
I think people just keep thinking about the same thing, that he can't do weight. If he couldn't do weight, we will go to 175. We have a contract for 3 fights. We have Boo Boo Andrade, we have Charlo, we have David Morrell. If everything goes well, then I'm pretty sure it's going to go well. So I wouldn't sign that contract for 168 if I didn't think he was going to do 168.
Now let's talk about that real quick. You heard Jose Benavidez. He mentioned a lot of people, they talk about David Benavidez basically being too big and he's struggling to make weight. You heard Jose, he said if we were struggling to make weight, we would have just moved up to 175. But he's making weight and he doesn't have a problem making weight. Which means...
Well, I'm not really 100% sure about that. Listen, it's very obvious that David Benavidez, he's not a natural super middleweight. He's at least a light heavyweight. Now, you can argue that he's a little bit lighter than some of the other light heavyweights that we see. But at the end of the day, David Benavidez, yeah, he's making it there, but he don't have much more time there. He's going to have a couple more fights there. He really only wants Canelo Alvarez, mainly from what I've seen in certain interviews. Now, of course, he's willing to get in the ring with some of those other guys. But David Benavidez did look a little bit drained, at least at the weigh-in, than a little bit more than what he probably should have been. And that just happens with certain fighters. Devin Haney's doing the same thing right now at 135. Shakur Stevenson did it a little bit at 130. It just happens. It happens with a lot of elite fighters. Canelo Alvarez did it at 154. He did it so much to where he had to catch weight a lot of fights at 155. It just happens. So you can make it there for a while, but eventually, especially once your body starts to grow, you're eventually going to have to get out of that weight division.
This applies to the Devin Haney situation and any other fighter that people want to say, oh, they're too big for the weight class. If you can make the weight, then there is no advantage or disadvantage for either fighter. Matter of fact...
Well, I understand what you're trying to say, but at the end of the day, we have to take things into context. there are certain fighters that, yeah, they're just able to make the weight. But every athlete is built differently. Certain fighters might be able to drain a little bit better. Let's also be real. Certain fighters might be on a special something. Um, when it came down to it, I actually was reviewing a very decent video by that of Chronicles of Judah on his Patreon channel the other day. And I was looking at his preview for the David Benavidez Caleb Plant fight. And one thing that he pointed out is that his quote unquote biochemist, which is a person that usually works with some sort of performance enhancing drugs, or someone that, works with how to better the athlete's career, how to make them, in terms of longevity, or with performance enhancing drugs. The same guy that worked with Juan Manuel Marquez in the fourth Manny Pacquiao fight, where Marquez, in my view, was undoubtedly on steroids because of the increased gain in muscle mass all of a sudden out of nowhere. And on top of that, the acne, which is also a very big sign of steroids. And in my view, Pacquiao is probably on something as well, but it just is what it is. Anyways, that same guy that was helping out Marquez apparently was in David Benavidez' camp, at least quote unquote visited him, during footage of the Caleb Plant versus David Benavidez fight. So very interesting. Is David Benavidez possibly on something that is making him cut weight a little bit better? Who knows? I'm not going to go that far to allege it completely, but it wouldn't shock me at all.
If there is any type of disadvantage, it might be for the bigger guy because he has to.
Sometimes you can certainly debate that, but a lot of these guys, they also rehydrate and balloon up a very big deal. David Benavidez is going to be bigger than a lot of these guys. It just is what it is. He is not a natural 168 pounder, and there's just a lot of fighters that are like that. I don't think it's anything to get your panties in a twist about. That's just how it is. Devin Haney, in my view, is also not a natural 135 pounder. Yeah, they can make the weight, just barely, but eventually, especially because they're still growing, they're going to have to eventually get out of that weight division, or eventually they may lose a fight because they're too weight drained.
Train harder just to make the weight. And then there's the concerns of him being drained. And we've never seen David Benavidez or Devin Haney look drained in a fight. With that being said,
well, I've never seen them look drained to the point to where I thought it affected their performance to a great degree. But you can tell at the weigh-ins that they're making it, but they're making it by the skin of their teeth.
it's been a long time coming for David Benavidez. David is one of those rare fighters, kind of like a Devin Haney, that has always wanted all of the smoke. I even heard David Benavidez said, look.
Well, you know what? Let me actually state this, and this is not me in any way making any sort of excuses or anything like that. But a lot of the times, fighters are like this, especially when they don't really have anything to lose. David Benavidez is a guy right now that does not have a belt. He's still trying to get in the ring with Canelo Alvarez. Right now, David Benavidez is a fighter that has nothing to lose. And you see this with a lot of fighters, especially on the come-up, because they want to prove themselves so badly. Like Errol Spence Jr. or, David Benavidez right now, or even Keith Thurman. But then when they finally win that belt, and then all of a sudden, challenges come on a little bit later on down the line, all of a sudden, they don't always want all the smoke with every single fighter. That's what happens with a lot of fighters, and it just happens with a certain amount of them. So people take a look at some of these fighters, and they're like, oh, he's one of those rare fighters that wants to fight everybody. Well, the reason why there's certain fighters like Shakur Stevenson and David Benavidez that quote-unquote want to fight everybody, and don't get me wrong, there are certain fighters that still want to fight everybody, even though, they still have had an illustrious career, like that of, Mayweather, Pacquiao, in my opinion. Not saying that there was not certain fights maybe that they didn't evade, because I was not around during their whole entire career, at least to watch it. But there was a certain amount of fighters that, fought everybody, or fought most people. But, you also have to take it in a little bit of a different context, because David Benavidez right now is really trying to prove himself. So it's going to be really interesting when, he possibly makes it to the top to see if he acts the same. Because that's usually when fighters change a little bit. But we'll see.
Man, regardless if I win or lose, I want to find out how good I am. That's what you call a fighter who is really trying to challenge himself. Just when it looked like David Benavidez would never get the opportunity, and many other fighters would never get the opportunity to get that signature win, now all of a sudden, David is in position to where he has many options. It reminds me of the Errol Spence situation before he got the Kell Brook fight,
Exactly, and David Benavidez realized that he had to chomp on the bit for this opportunity. That's something that Charlo and Andrade should have realized years ago. But the difference is that I think that Andrade actually didn't realize that he was supposed to do that, or that he needed to do that. Charlo is just a dude that's been using that as an excuse for years upon years. oh, I want to fight Canelo Alvarez. Like, the dude is not willing to get in the ring with anybody.
Even after he beat Kell Brook, nobody wanted to fight him. But eventually, it took some time, but eventually everyone wanted to fight him, including people like Keith Thurman. So at least...
Yes, once he became the winner. And Errol Spence, that's why I said I credit him to a great degree as well. Because that's what real fighters do when they claim they want opportunities. They take, they chomp at the bit. They take, the opportunities. Not like Jermall Charlo, who says that, he wants to fight all these guys, but then he's not willing to get in the ring with certain guys that might be able to lead him there.
He started to say, David is now in that same situation. He went from having no options to having all of the options. And according to his trainer, David Benavidez...
Well, I'm going to see about that because I'm not 100% confident that Charlo's going to get in the ring with him. In fact, I'm about 99% confident that that fight's not going to happen. I don't think Charlo is going to step in the ring with him. I think Charlo is scared to death of David Benavidez, or I think he knows more than likely that David Benavidez will be a little bit too much. And he's still mainly looking for that Canelo Alvarez fight, but we'll see what ends up happening with that. Andrade, we'll see. I'll give him the benefit of the doubt. I'll give him a little bit of time before I criticize him because Andrade seems at least somewhat relatively serious to take on some of these fights. As for David Morrell, I don't really want to see a David Benavidez versus David Morrell fight right now. To be honest with you, I don't really want to see David Morrell versus any of the top contenders because what is the guy, like 8-0, 9-0? Like, let's give the kid at least 15 fights.
About to be in the toughest fights of his career, possibly back to back to back. I think there's a very good chance his next opponent could be Demetrius Andrade. Andrade has already made it very clear that if he can't get Charlo next, he's going to be fighting the winner of Plant Benavidez. Unless...
That'd be a great fight. I would love to see David Benavidez versus Demetrius Boo Andrade. That'd be a great fight because Andrade, allegedly, with all this, skill set that I keep hearing about, he's been the biggest threat to Canelo Alvarez for such a long time. He's similar to Floyd Mayweather, all this other stuff. And don't get me wrong, I can see where certain people think that. I always thought his skill set was a tad bit overrated, just my view. But he does have a good skill set. And if he is better than Caleb Plant, if he is better than some of those other guys that people allege, he should be able to beat David Benavidez. Because Caleb Plant was able to pull out a good 4 or 5 rounds. So, now, of course, Caleb Plant, one could argue that he's built a little bit bigger. But one could actually argue that Andrade's around his same size. He's taller. He's got a little bit of longer arms, I believe. And Demetrius Andrade is not small built either. So, if Andrade is as good as what a lot of people think that he is, he should be able to beat David Benavidez. Just the way that I view it. Jermall Charlo, same thing. But we'll see.
Andrade is going to end up fighting.
I would actually really love to see that David Benavidez versus Demetrius Boo Andrade fight. That'd be a great classic matchup.
Charlo, because Charlo also said that he was preparing for Andrade next. And if that's the case, there's a very good chance that we could even get David Benavidez versus David Morrell. Morrell just might be the toughest challenge for Benavidez, especially considering the fact that he's a natural super middleweight. We really don't know how.
What do you mean that he's the toughest fight for David Benavidez, Dante? I thought that Andrade and Charlo, I thought that they would clearly beat David Benavidez. Once again, the truth comes out eventually about their opinions about certain fighters when they believe a fight is about to happen.
Charlo is going to look because he's moving up in weight. We've never seen him fight at 168 before. And
Charlo's not going to beat David Benavidez. And I thought maybe a couple of years ago that maybe Jermall Charlo, that he would have a 50 to 40% chance. But just taking a look at David Benavidez in that Caleb Plant fight, no. To be honest with you, I don't think Charlo would even do as well as what Caleb Plant did. He's got very good counters. He's very powerful. And he's a good all-around boxer. But, like a lot of people, they love to compare him to Floyd Mayweather. The only thing similar about Jermall Charlo and Floyd Mayweather is that they're both black. That's really about it. If you want to label them as such. Jermall Charlo, in my view, really doesn't fight like Floyd. Both the Charlo brothers have similar flaws. They're too stiff, in my opinion. They're both vulnerable to a right cross and also to a left hook. And I think that they have problems sometimes with good pressure fighters and also slick boxers. And David Benavidez, man, he's gonna be quite big. So that would be definitely a factor.
And his last fight was the worst performance of his career. Now, this could all motivate Jermall Charlo.
Well, in terms of the lowest grade tier opponent, you can maybe argue that was the worst performance of his career. Matt Korobov also, in my view, was a very bad performance as well. Even though Matt Korobov, of course, is a level above Juan Macias Montiel.
to look better than he's ever.
And let me also state this, because there was a person that was trying to debate with me in the comment section, and listen, this is his view. Because there was a certain guy saying that, oh, Jermall Charlo, he beat certain guys like Matt Korobov and Sergey Derevyanchenko and blah, blah, blah. Dude, none of those guys are A-grade fighters, man. Sergey Derevyanchenko and Matt Korobov, those guys are not A-grade fighters, period. It just is what it is. Anyway.
Looked before, or he could possibly be on a decline. We're just going to have to see how he looks in his next fight. But we're not even sure if his next fight is going to be at 168, which would make no sense to me for him to still be fighting at 160, because all of the big fights are now at 168. I told you guys Morrell would be...
Right, but you like to allege all this shit about how Canelo Alvarez allegedly ducks all these guys, but then whenever it comes to Jermall Charlo or one of your boys, you're like, oh, well, it would make no sense to me why it does that. It makes complete sense to me, because Jermall Charlo... he's the guy that you say Canelo Alvarez is. Charlo is the one that ain't really fighting anybody. Charlo hasn't fought anyone ever since Julian J. Rock Williams. That's just the fact of the matter. And those Sergey Derevyanchenko and Matt Korobov fights, those were okay at the time because he was still kind of getting used to the weight class. But it's like, dude, come on, it's been a few years. It's like, what the fuck are you doing in that weight class? You haven't done shit.
Benavidez's toughest fight possibly, but Andrade is up there as well. I think the better the opposition, the better Andrade usually performs. But he is still, once again, moving up in weight. I mean, he just had his first fight at 168, but we're going to really see how he looks against top-level opposition at 168. So with all these possible opponents next for David Benavidez, his announcement for his next fight should be a pretty big announcement. That's all I got for now, guys. I'm on to the next one.
But anyways, that's really about it. I just thought that was very interesting. The fight I actually would really love to see is Andrade versus David Benavidez, because both of those guys are alleged boogeymen. And if Demetrius Andrade is supposed to be a guy that is slick but also can mix it up with you, a guy that is as skilled as what a lot of people like to say that he is, that'd be a great litmus test for really both of them. That'd be a great fight. I don't think Jermall Charlo really has a chance, in my view. He's just a little bit too small, and his skill set is just too limited. As for David Morrell, he's just way too inexperienced, and he still has certain things he's got to tighten up on. So the fight I would really love to see next is Demetrius Andrade. Do I think that fight's going to happen next? I don't know. We'll see. But anyways, we'll see. Anyways, it's going to be very exciting to see what ends up happening in Mr. David Benavidez' career. Also, Canelo Alvarez's as well. So we'll see. But anyways, that's really about it for today. Thank you so much for watching. I'll talk to you all later, and we'll see what happens.